off we go.
Narayanam namaskritya Narayanam namaskritya Naram chaiva narottamam Naram chaiva narottamam Devim sarasvatim vyasam Devim sarasvatim vyasam Tato jayam udirayet Tato jayam udirayet. Three times together. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Akanda Mandalakaram Yena Vyaptam Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hey Krishna, Karuna Sindhu, Dina Bandhu, Jagatpate, Gopesha, Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta, Namostite. Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe, Vrindavaneshwari, Vrishabhanu Sute Devi, Pranamami Hari Priye. Apavitra Pavitro Va, Sarvavasta Gatopi Va, Ya Smaret, Pundarikaksham Sa, Bhayabhyantara Shuchihi. Okay. There's a second verse to that. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam daivim sarasvatim vyasam tato jayamudirayat nasta prayesu abhadreshu nityam bhagavati something nityam bhagavati sevaya bhagavati utamashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtuki. So we could maybe, someone could maybe find that verse, and then if Jessica likes, she can sing two verses, and we can translate. It's nice.
I'll find it.
Okay.
I'll do it.
It's like, by chanting the names, nasti prayeso, but all inauspicious things are destroyed in the mind, something like that. When we, nasta prayeso badreshu nityam bhagavate sevate, in the serving Bhagavan, bhakti arises in the mind, and all inauspicious things are destroyed. So quite beautiful. And let's add it. Okay, my friends. So we'll forge on, and then we'll see. Maybe we'll change stories next week. I think we have to change the hours because I'm going to be in Europe. So I will be 6 hours ahead of East Coast time. So I don't know if Alice has reached out to you, but we'll be changing the time. And again, let us never take things for granted, and thank Alice yet once again for all her seva. And, send us some love privately, everybody. It's she's taken on a lot, and she's not feeling well today. So double best wishes for Alice. Where are you, Alice? Are you up there? She might not even be up there today. Okay, so right, let's forge on. And just and so we may change stories next week. We'll see how we do. So I think we're on chapter 2, book 2. No, book 1. Or is it book 2? Let's see. Chapter 2, book 2, chapter 2, verse 7. And how do I know that? Because Alice texted me. So yet again, our dependence on Alice. So I'm serious. We are very, very grateful and very blessed that she's taken all this on. So I think we got up to verse 7. Okay. So remember the Parīkṣit's questions. What is the Dharma of the one about to die? So the first verse, Śuka says, the Vedic scriptures, meaningless words. I just love that. Meaningless words. And the Gita doesn't say it's meaningless words, but it says put flowery words. Yamimam pushpitam bacham. And only the less intelligent are interested in these flowery words. What flowery, why flowery? Because they promise you do Vedic rituals and you get boons. You do this ritual, you get that. You want a child, you want to go to the celestial realm. So they're flowery. But what happens to all flowers? Eventually they wilt and die. So the very first verse of the answer is this kind of dig at the Vedic scriptures. Keep in mind, the Vedic, meaning the old Vedic ritual, keep in mind that was the mainstream religion of the day. So the moksha traditions are going on the margins. So then we had verse 3, just accepting what is necessary. Verse 4, what do you need beds for? What do you need a house for? If you can sleep under a tree, what's the point of pillows if you have arms? So this is the radical renunciatory kind of attitude. The path of inaction. The Gita says there's two paths: the inaction path, and then he says the other path got lost, the karma yoga path, and he comes to reestablish it. But this is this particular Śuka is part of this ascetic tradition. Remember, he's walking around naked in the forest. So these 4 and 5 are those kinds of verses, and 6 basically saying it's the Atman that's the cherished goal. It's the Atman that one should fix one mind. So we'll read the last verse. Verse 6 is the Atman that is the cherished goal. It's the goal of life, my friends. To experience this Atman. I asked my class yesterday, Hindu Phil, 100 students. I said, how many of you believe that something survives death? And I would say maybe 1 or 2 students didn't put their hands up. Everybody did. And I said, well, think it through then. What is it that survives death? Why aren't we paying attention to that? Think it through. Something survives death. What is it? Shouldn't we find out about it? Shouldn't that be the most interesting, important thing in our lives? That, we know death is imminent. We don't know when. So why aren't we directing more attention to what is it that survives that death that you all believe in? I was referring to the students. So it's according to the Atman, you can call it anything you want. And it's the cherished goal. And it is an anksha of the unlimited Bhagavan. The text doesn't want us to stray too far from the idea that, most moksha traditions are seeking the Atman. Those are the jnana traditions. And jnana is very much a part. The Bhagavatam is jnana rich, jnana laden, but it doesn't want us to keep our eyes off the ball that anksha, that Atman, is not the ultimate goal. It may be an ultimate goal or a cherished goal, but the ultimate goal is the source, is Bhagavan. Sorry, I just had the log has just fallen. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So it is an anksha, the term in Sanskrit for a fraction, a portion, a spark, if you will. Here, it is a part of the unlimited Bhagavan. So like a sun ray in the sun. It is self-manifest. It is not made. So the Indian tradition can't make any sense of the idea of creatio ex nihilo, that something's made from nothing. It makes no sense to the Indian way of thinking. So it's self-manifest. It's perfect. It's pure consciousness. There's nothing in it or out in it that can taint it. And it lies within one's heart. The heart is the area, right? So if you think of the idea of a substance, so substances have qualities. So we infer there must be a substance from the qualities. So like red is a quality, but it's not like red just floats about in space. Red has to be located in the substance, like a red shirt, a red car. So qualities have to be grounded in substances, and the Greeks agreed with this, Aristotle and everybody. I don't know about everybody, but so therefore consciousness is a quality, so it has to be grounded. And it's grounded in the Atman, which is infinitesimal. But nonetheless, it is. It exists. So where does it actually exist? Where does it exist? Even if it's infinitesimal, it must be somewhere. Consciousness pervades the body. And it's stopped from extending beyond the body karmically. So when you shed the subtle body, actually our consciousness is potentially infinite. So then the question is, okay, so that's the quality of Chit, or Chitti Shakti. So you can call it Chit, you can call it Chitti Shakti, you can call it Chetana. These are the terms for consciousness. But it's a quality, and qualities have to be grounded. Where's it grounded? So it's grounded in this infinitesimal substance, which Nyaya calls a dravya. And that has to be located somewhere. The consciousness doesn't, because it's a quality, so it can pervade the body. So it doesn't have to be sort of grounded anywhere, but it has to be grounded in a substance, and that substance has to be geographically located, has to be located somewhere. So it's located in the heart. So sometimes and that heart is sometimes called the guha, the cave, the secret place. In the Upanishads, it's called the guha. Okay, so that's how we make sense of this comment here, that it is self-manifest, the Atman, perfect, lies within one's heart, literally. So not the blood, not the organ, muscle, and blood of the heart, but that location there. So when we talk, and also I think that the subtle body kind of permeates from the heart as well, and that's how we say the heart is the seat of emotions and so forth. Even in the Western tradition, there's some sense of that. This Atman is the goal, the one should fix in mind and worship contentedly. It is in this way that the cause of samsara is brought to an end. So this contemplating the Atman is actually jnana yoga. Contemplating the Atman. Now, when you want to stop all contemplation, then that's dhyana yoga, dhyana, dhyana. So dhyana yoga is, even though Patanjali only puts it as the seventh limb, that's his schema, right? He has samadhi at the end. But in the other literatures, when you want to refer to that kind of yoga, you call it dhyana, dhy, dhyana yoga. There's no contemplation in that. That's fixing the mind. That's nirodha. That's a nirodha process. It's not a contemplative process. If contemplation means, thinking in a certain way, then dhyana yoga is not that. Dhyana yoga is utter cessation of all thought, contemplation, any mental activity at all. But jnana yoga, Jnana, which should be pronounced jnana, it's one of the only words in Sanskrit that you don't pronounce as it's written. It's pronounced gya, for reasons that historical linguists would be able to tell you. And so that jnana yoga then is contemplating, is constantly keeping the great Upanishadic teachings in mind. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Sarvamidam Kalu Brahman, all this is Brahman. I am Atman, Sa Atma Tattvamasi, we're all that Atman, you are also that. These great sayings from the Upanishads. It's more, that kind of contemplation is jnana yoga, where you're keeping the jnana in mind, but your mind is not completely still, otherwise you couldn't be contemplating anything. Okay, so this verse is more of a jnana yoga kind of, at this point, it's saying something more in the jnana yoga sphere of things, because it says one should the goal one should worship contentedly. Right, this, but sort of contemplate, I would take that as meaning. Now, there's a river that separates Prakriti from the Brahman lokas, from the, we could call it the non-material aspect of existence. There are infinite universes, but they are bound by 7 layers, and beyond that is the Vaitarani river. And actually, yes, it goes to hell. Oh, wait, no, I'm mixing up 2 different rivers. Sorry, take that back. Okay, we'll have to look up where exactly is the Vaitarani river located cosmographically. Is it in the universe or is it outside? I can't remember, but it doesn't matter. But it's the river going to hell, and it's very interesting because you see this overlap with the river in the Latin tradition going to Hades. And why is there this overlap? Because it's Indo-European. That once upon a time, these cosmographies, the celestials and and Hades and the river. Remember what's his name? The dog with the 3 heads, beginning with a C, Cereno or something, in the Latin tradition, in the Roman tradition, a lot of which came from the Greeks. So there's lots of overlap because Cerberus. Thank you, Jane. Cerberus. And so this is, pardon? Cerberus, so nicely pronounced. Okay, so there's this river. It doesn't matter. The point is, what's the point? Upon seeing people fallen into the Vaitarini river, meaning they're going to hell, and experiencing the suffering generated by their karma, there are hellish realms in these traditions, because if you have really, really bad karma, how are you going to burn it up? Everything, it's an eye for an eye. Every unit of bad karma has to come back to you. So if you were like Adolf Hitler or somebody and you caused in just total inconceivable suffering for millions, either you take millions of births and you have to experience each and every unit that inflicted upon others. It's literally an eye for an eye. It's just cause and effect. It's a law. So either you have to take millions of births, or you compact it all into these special bodies that can tolerate inordinate amounts of suffering. So they're hellish realms. But of course, you don't stay there forever. And as soon as your karma's burnt up, then you come back. So, but upon perceiving this, right, this river, and experiencing the suffering generated by the karma, who other than a beast? Why aren't we afraid of this? A beast meaning covered in tamas. A beast is so densely covered in tamas that they don't even, some beasts are standing in a line in the slaughterhouse. Actually, some cows do realize, and they try to bolt, but some may not. They may just sort of just go ambling along to their death. So who other than a beast, upon seeing this, would neglect contemplating on the Supreme, and rather than that, engage in immoral behavior? If we engage in adharma, harming others, we're harming ourselves. Not in a wishy-washy sort of new agey way, but it's the law of cause and effect. Everything we do to others inevitably has to come back by the law. It's just a law. It's like gravity. There's a law in gravity. You can calculate the law mathematically. It's consistent. And likewise with the law of karma. It's not whimsical. It's not in the hands of some unpredictable God. It's a mathematical law. It's a physical law. It belongs in the realm of physics, actually. But it's just something that is not as observable as the other laws that we accept, like electromagnetic, strong nuclear, weak nuclear. We can observe those laws in a more empirical sort of way. But we can't perceive the law of karma in an empirical way. We infer it. And therefore it wouldn't come, it would be, it wouldn't, in a sense, although it could be a law of physics, it's not a law of, it's not a Brahman law. It's not something like, Krishna's blue. That's something completely theological. In principle, it's a law of physics, as it affects matter. It affects human behavior is enacted through matter. And that matter, the actions embedded in matter return as reactions. So that's kind of physics. It's a physical law, or at least aspects of it are. Human agency is not a physical law. And therefore, so it's borderline physics. But anyway, so this is karma. Okay. Now, some people, so this immoral behavior, it's not just some code that some God makes up, and thou shalt this and thou shalt not that. It's not sort of just kind of like the decree of some God, not that there's anything right or wrong about that, but immoral behavior is adharma, and it comes under the jurisdiction of karma. It's not a whimsical principle. It's not sort of some God on high that makes a pronouncement and maybe, but it's part of this law of karma. Now, verse 8. Some people contemplate. Now, why I want to do this passage before we move on to another story is because you're going to see the samadhi practice focused on Ishvara. Now, in Patanjali, Ishvara tasyavachikaha pranabaha is Ishvara manifests as Om. So the japa tadartha bhavanam. So one is supposed to do in Patanjali and yoga, what he's recommended. He's recommending this, even though he's not adamant about it. He says you can fix your mind on anything you want. But he, in order to fix the mind on Ishvara in the Patanjalian tradition, as also the Upanishadic tradition, Ishvara comes as Om. Om is Brahman. So you've got Om, Brahman, Ishvara. These are all synonyms. A equals B, B equals C, C equals A. So Brahman equals Ishvara, Ishvara equals Om, Om equals Brahman. So that's the way of fixing the mind. And what do you do? How do you fix the mind on Om? Tad japa, you repeat the sound softly, tadartha bhavanam. Being aware, not in an active way, because the mind has to be still, but still being aware that it's Brahman. Right. But there is more visual forms of chittavritti nirodha, mental concentration on Bhagavan, which are probably more common in Indian tradition, actually. Well, certainly they're very common. And that's fixing the mind on the form of Bhagavan. I wanted you to get a sense of this, that Ishvara in Patanjali, who's kind of like, he's in the background, he's kind of mysterious. There's only 20, 25 words. He's a Purusha Vishesha, he's a special kind of Purusha. Klesha karma samaya anavichinna, never been affected by ignorance and the kleshas. Tasya sarvagnya nirati sayami, supremely omniscient, guru purvesham, he was the teacher of the ancients. That's about it. I'm just writing now a chapter for my book saying, that Patanjali's Isha was either Krishna or Vishnu or Shiva. There were no other options for Ishvara in the 3rd century. Who else was there? All Ishvara traditions at that time were Shaiva, Vaishnava, or Krishna, and so Patanjali doesn't come out and say so, but he would have been one of those. What else would you be if you were an Ishvara, if you followed Ishvara in that time? That's what Ishvara is in the Indian tradition. It's one of these forms. So anyway, now we're going to get a sense of the Patanjalian type of meditation, but with a much more visually rich presentation of Ishvara upon whom the mind should be fixed. Let's see what it looks like. Some people contemplate with concentration on the Supreme Being as situated in the inner space of the heart, within their own bodies, the size of the span of a hand. Now, in the Upanishads, 2 things are stated about the size of the Atman. One is you take the hair and you split it into 10,000 pieces, the tip of the hair, That's the size of the Atman. That's just a mathematical way of saying infinitesimal. We don't really know what infinitesimal is. Our minds don't understand either infinite or infinitesimal, the other end. So the Upanishads, to help us out, gives us this sort of something we can fix our minds on a little bit more. Mathematically, tip of the hair, cut it into 10,000, and one of those is the size of the Atman. But elsewhere, in different Upanishads, it says it's the size of the thumb, or maybe the index finger, which is much larger. So how do you reconcile that? Well, you have to look at the commentators. Remember, how do you do this? The size of the span of the hand, it says here, verse 8. So when you have a contradiction like that in Vedantic studies, in the tradition of Vedanta, you have it seems to be quite a glaring, quite a serious contradiction between the size of the palm of the hand and 1/10,000th the tip of the hair. What do? You go into the commentaries and you see if they pick up on this. And I haven't done that for this particular question, but we could quite easily do it. We could go to those sections, look in Shankara, look in Ramanuja, and see, do they pick up on this? Do they pick up on the fact that there's this contradiction between the size of the Atman? But that's how you engage traditional Vedanta studies. A question arises and you look in the commentators. And if there's nothing in the commentators, then the teacher is allowed to speculate, but the speculation has always got to be within the contours of the philosophy of that particular tradition. You can't step outside of whatever your Vedanta. If you're an Advaitin and you run into a question and there's no answer in the commentary, then the teacher can construct an answer, but it has to be according to Advaita metaphysics. Likewise, if you're a Vishishta Advaita, Ramanuja's tradition, the same rules apply. So that's how you engage, that's how you undertake Vedanta studies. Run into a problem, first step, you see the problem, okay, contradiction. Remember, you cannot, if you're a Vedantin, you cannot say there is a contradiction. No. That's out the academic scholars are going to say that. They'll say, oh, that's no problem. The Upanishads are written by different people across the centuries, and one said this and one said something else. It's natural, chronological. You can't say that if you're a Vedantin. They're eternal and they're perfect. Can be no contradictions. All right. So you're going to make it work. How do you make it work? You're going to figure out a way of making it work. You have to use your ingenuity. You have to use you have to think about it. But whatever solution you come up with to this problem, I'm calling it a problem like this, to this, so we say, question, out of respect for Vedanta, we'll call it a question rather than a problem. You have to make it work, but you have to make it work within the metaphysics of your tradition. Okay, so that's so. If I had, so we could quite easily. We could quite easily then go into the two Upanishads where the different sizes are given, and we could read first of all we have to read if they even pick up on this on the problem, and I would imagine they do, but I don't know. And if they don't, good luck. If you're a Vedanta and your students are sitting there going, Maharaji, hello, tick, tick, tick. Come up with something. What's the answer to this one? So then you have to think fast on your feet. If you're, that's how Vedanta operates. Okay, so the texts are eternal and perfect. What you can't do is say there's a contradiction. If you're a Vedantin, that's a no-no. So now the size here, it takes the position of the size of the span of a hand. Okay, so someone like myself, who is I'm part of the Bhāgavata tradition, I would immediately be favorable to that interpretation. So I would have a bias, all right, which would be, in postmodern disclosure. In the humanities, it's called postmodern disclosure. You're allowed to, as long as you disclose your bias, that somehow that's all right. So then I would be partial to that, and I would try to make sense of the other one, and I would take this. I would take it, or someone like myself in the Bhagavata tradition would favor this point of view. This is the world of Vedanta, my friends. Remember, the Bhagavata Purāṇa is an extension of Vedanta. It's written by Vyasa. Vyasa is the author of the Vedanta Sutras, Vyasa. So the author of the Bhāgavata Purāṇa is Vyasa. So the Bhagavata tradition says this is Vyasa's commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. They don't see a distinction between Purāṇa and Vedanta. The very first verse of the Bhagavata Purāṇa is simply, well, first line or second line is the first verse of the Vedanta Sutra. So the Bhagavata tradition doesn't see itself as distinct. Okay, so these are all technical points. You might be interested in this sort of larger world of Vedanta scholarship. Perhaps some of you are interested. So these might be interesting points. So now, Saisaba, he has 4 arms bearing, okay, this is Vishnu then. 4 arms bearing lotus, disc, conch, and club. These are the 4 arms. And there's infinite forms of Vishnu, and some of them change the ordering. And then, according to whatever nuance is being stressed. But there's a lotus and the conch for the bhaktas, and disc and club for the demons. For the devotees, the lotus and the conch shell, and the disc is a weapon, as is the club. So this is Vishnu. And why not? Why can't God can have as many hands as he wants? Unless you want to say he can't, in which case, how are you going to do that? Good luck. So, man is made in the image of God. There's, in the Old Testament, it's called Imago Dei. I mean, there's been a huge amount of ink spilt. And what does that mean? Man is made in the image of God. And I could say a lot about it, but I won't. But in the Indian tradition, of course, it's not that we are making God in our image. It's not that we're, it's not that we're anthropomorphizing God because we're, one of the Greeks, his name was Xenophanes. He said, well, we believe in the gods are human-like, but if horses were making up theology, their God would be a horse. And, in other words, you just construct God in your own image, which is a fair point. But it's actually the other way around. We have forms because our cause has forms. If you're going to say the cause is formless, the absolute is formless, and where does form come from in the creation? Whatever's in the effect must be in the cause. It's called Satkaryavad in Indian philosophy. Whatever's in the effect, how did it get there? It must have been in the cause. If it's not in the cause, then where did it get there? And then you have to have some other cause. Do you see what I'm saying? Like olive oil has to have, the cause of olive oil has to have the same properties as olive oil. So the olive is the cause, and olive oil is the effect. Well, whatever ingredients, whatever the chemistry, or whatever the sort of nutrition, whatever the nutrients are in olive oil, they have to be present in the cause, the olive. Otherwise, where do they come from? If olive oil's got something that the olive doesn't have, then there must be some other cause. Now you've got 2 causes. Let's say olive oil has got pepper in it. And you say, well, olives don't have pepper in it. Well, then you have to have another cause there. And you have to say there's 2 causes. There's pepper and there's olives. Well, that's no good if you're only going to posit one cause. So therefore, whatever's in the effect has to be in the cause. Are you following this? It's called Satkaryavad in Indian philosophy. So if this world has form and quality, you can't say the absolute cause of it is formless and qualityless. Well, where did the form and quality come from in this world? So therefore, the idea is God must have form and qualities, but infinite forms and infinite qualities because he's God. And that's very clear to the Indian way of thinking. Why do you think there are so many forms with all their wonderful qualities? Because the cause so the effect must be present in the cause. Is that clear? It's called Sat Karyavad. The cause, the effect exists in the cause. Sat, the Karya, the effect, Sat exists, pre-exists. So the Imagino Dei, man is made in the image of God. It must mean God has a form. So therefore, but of course that form may be, it's going to be it's not going to be limited like ours. It's not going to be made of matter and decomposing stuff. It's not going to be blood and guts. It's going to be pure Satchidananda. And Vishnu happens to have 4 arms. And some of the forms have so many heads. It's not we're projecting. We're projecting some superhuman. We're saying, okay, well, we have one head, so God's greater than us, so let's give him four heads. And we have two arms, and God's greater, let's give him four arms. Not like that. It's the other way around. Because God has form, therefore we have forms in this world of samsara. Think it through. Think it through. Think of the principle of the effect and cause. Anything in the effect has to be, where did it get into the effect? It must be present in the cause in some sort of way. To think that, contemplate that, and see if that starts to become, see if you start to see the logic of that. So, Purāṇa Vishnu. I'm just sick and tired of people saying this is all mythology. So I'm on an anti-mythological crusade right now, which is culminating in my book. The present book is called In Defense of a God with Form. I'll get it out of my system once it's published. I'll be like, okay, it's out there. You read it or don't read it. But I'm done with that. Not flesh and blood, my friends. Satchidananda. The form is you know, like the Atman. Krishna says you can't cut it, you can't reduce it. It's you know, the Atman is infinite, it's unlimited. In the second chapter of the Gita, it can't be pierced. So these forms are made of consciousness. They're not. You can't slice off Vishnu's arms any more than you can slice the Atman. Right then. So now let's see how do you contemplate God in samadhi now? Okay, your mind is completely fixed. You've gone through the 8 limbs of yoga. You've gone through dharana stage, the dhyana stage, which is still, the mind is still a little bit distracted, and you've reached the state of samadhi. And Patanjali has 6 stages of samadhi, but we don't need to engage those just yet. But the mind is fixed. And here's what you contemplate. Some people, all right, others may chant Om like Patanjali's people. They contemplate Ishvara chanting Om. So some do that. But some people, verse 8, contemplate with concentration, dhyana, on the Supreme Being. Oh, we just did this. He has 4 arms, right. He has a smiling face, verse 9. Eyes large as lotuses. And I've spoken about this before. You can't describe God's beauty. It's indescribable. We only know Prakritic things. So we can only describe Prakritic things. So we can describe a Prakritic lotus. Now, if you've had a vision of God, and great sages throughout the centuries, right across India, north, south, west, east, across the generations, so many accounts of called darshana. What are you going to do with that body of information? What are you going to do with that body of truth claims? What are you going to do? Say you don't believe it? Well, based on what? And what would you say? I don't believe it. All you can say honestly is, well, I haven't seen it. I don't know anyone else has seen it. Science doesn't have if you're an honest scientist, science, you can't say science, you can't say science, you can only say science doesn't have the equipment to perceive it, because science deals with matter and the laws of cause and effect in space and time. So science is dharmically unequipped to deal with anything beyond, if there is anything beyond space, time, cause, effect, matter, whatever lies beyond that is by definition beyond the jurisdiction of science, which by definition looks at material causes and infers and then makes inferences from that. So honest scientists can only say that a 4-armed form of Vishnu, if a scientist is honest, can only say, we have no business commenting. It is beyond the jurisdiction of our knowledge system and of our methodology, of the scientific method. That's all you can say. If you say anything more than that, then you're making a faith statement. If you say there is no Vishnu or that's a faith statement, and that has no business in science. I hope that's clear. So an honest scientist would say, well, maybe, especially when you have a claim that has been, for generations and generations and generations of bhaktas across time and space, countless reports of visions of God. What are you going to do with that? All you can say is, if you're a rationalist and you operate, and your epistemology is based on reason, you can simply say this is not within the jurisdiction of the rational epistemology, the rational way of knowing. Epistemology means, how do you know? I want to be clear about that. It's just kind of my latest thing. So for Ram Vishnu, take it or leave it. If you say I reject it, then that's a belief statement. If you say I reject it, you are making a statement of faith. I do not believe it. Perhaps more, so perhaps a safer thing to say it would be, I don't know. I haven't seen it. I don't know anyone's seen it. But, well, that's an honest position. Okay, enough of that. So he has a smiling face and eyes large as lotuses. So if you've had a vision of God, you can't describe it. So either you don't say anything or you do what you can. So Krishna's form is human-like. Actually, the human form is God-like, is more accurate. So anthropomorphism is the term, but really we're theopomorphists. We're made in the image of God. But let's say you've had a vision of Krishna. How do you describe it? So in the poetic mind, Krishna or any form of Ishvara is so beautiful. So you find the most beautiful thing that's known to you and known to others in the sphere of Prakriti, and that happens to be the lotus leaf in the Indian poetic tradition. The lotus leaf is just exquisitely shaped. It's just beautiful, the pinks and the shades and the shape and the texture. And so therefore Krishna is lotus this, lotus eyes, lotus everything. It's just an attempt to describe something which is indescribable, using the nearest category, the most exquisite category known to you, the poets, and you use that. So he has eyes large as lotuses. His cloth is yellowish, like the filament of a kadamba flower. It's not like our yellow. This is Brahman yellow. It's completely different. It's the substance that within which the yellow resides is Brahman. So it's not like any yellow we know, but it's closer to our yellow than it is to our red. So that's all you can do. So here he wears this yellow. He wears a yellow. Where does it say here? There it is. His cloth is yellowish, like the filament of a kadamba flower. Inside the flower there's the little filaments. He has ornaments brilliant with precious jewels and gold. All of God's ornaments are also made of pure consciousness. So you could actually be a bracelet on Bhagavan if you wanted to. You could, if you wanted to spend all eternity actually sitting on Vishnu's wrist, you could, as a bracelet, and you'd be blissed out. You'd be absolutely in ecstasy. You'd be touching God's body. You would just be, you just would want nothing else. You wouldn't be looking at the gopis and thinking, I want to be a gopi. That just wouldn't even occur to you. You would be so completely and utterly fulfilled. So all of God's ornaments are also, they're alive. They're conscious entities that take these forms because they want to sit on God's body. That's what you want to do. You could be an earring. The gopis are always jealous of Krishna's flute. They're saying, this flute is always touching your lips. We want to touch your lips, but but this flute, this flute has usurped our place. We don't like this flute. We want to have Krishna's lips for ourselves. This is the spiritual realm, my friends. Everything is pure consciousness. Don't try to project. Reason doesn't belong there. Reason can get you right up to taking a leap of faith. You have to use reason before you take that final leap. But once you're on the other side, reason has no place there. Reason is cause, effect, time, space, matter. Reason only operates in that domain. I hope that's clear. Reason is predicated on empiricism. Empiricism is central perception of matter. Okay. So then, his tender bud-like feet. Placed, okay, so hang on. He has ornaments brilliant with precious jewels and gold and earrings and a headpiece glittering with great gems. So if you look at Indian art, you'll see consistently pictures of Vishnu always have yellow dhoti, forearms, blue, wild lotus, a garland of forest flowers. Now, you can take a little creativity within that, provided, like, for example, it says he has armlets with jewels. Now, your freedom, your creative license as an artist, as you get to put the jewels where you want. You get to have the necklace big or small. So as long as you're following the descriptions, then if it's not too precise, it doesn't tell you it's 2 centimeters, right? Then you have a little that's where your creative license comes in. What does the helmet look like? Well, you'll see different kinds of helmets if you look at Indian art. They're all putting a helmet on there. Why are they doing that? Because they're following the descriptions. They're not making this stuff up. Traditional Indian art. Nowadays, you have modern fusion art. That's a whole new thing, where everything is kind of like a mishmash of this, that, and the other. And that's, I suppose, understandable. But if you look at anything that's even mildly traditional, you'll see that they're repeating. Durga always has a red sari. So so these motifs are coming from the descriptions like the one we're reading now of Vishnu in the Bhāgavatam. And they're repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated. Why? Because when you sit in meditation, you have to recreate them in your mind from samskaras. You make a form of samskaras. Now, you could say that's a mental construct. Well, of course it's a mental construct. Everything's a mental construct. Everything's a mental construct. To say that God is without form, that's a mental construct. To say that God is beyond words, that's a mental construct. You can't do it. Everything is the mind. But if we use the mind and we follow the traditions, right? So so everything's a mental construct, fine. So we follow in the footsteps of 2,000-3,000 years of tradition, and we follow in the footsteps of great bhaktas, and they tell us, and the sacred texts tell us, fine, it's a mental construct. You make a mental construct of Vishnu in your mind using the descriptions, and if you focus on that intensely, then that form at some point will dissolve into the actual presence of Bhagavan. And at that point you have a darshan. So the darshan can be inside your mind or external. As the story of Dhruva, we'll have a look at the story of Dhruva. Okay, so until that happens, it's a mental construct. How do you think Patanjali is any different? You're nirodhering the mind, nirodhering the mind, nirodhering the mind. Why? Because you want to get to the Atman. Well, you haven't experienced the Atman, so the Atman's a mental construct then. You heard about it from the Upanishads. If you're following Advaita Vedanta, aham brahmasmi, aham brahmasmi, aham brahmasmi, before you realize it, it's a mental construct. So you can't get away from mental constructs. Why? Because we're trapped by the mind. If we weren't trapped by the mind, we'd be liberated. So as long as we're trapped by the mind, Krishna says the mind is the friend or the enemy. So we use it as a friend, and we use it in spiritual practice. But in the beginning, we have to construct. We use the mind to either contemplate the Upanishads. Well, that's a mental construct, because this is samskara. We read the Upanishads, the words go into our minds, they sit there as a samskaras. That's a mental construct then. What else is it? So don't think that the forearm Vishnu is the only mental construct. Everything's a mental construct. Let's be clear about that. And if you're not going to use the mind, then forget it. You're never going to get liberated. How are you going to? You can't bypass the mind by clicking your fingers. We're trapped by the mind. That's what karma is. We're trapped by the mind. So we have to use the mind. And as we use the mind, then we're using the mind. Well, everything in the mind is samskara then. It's not the real thing. So we have no short way around that. No, there's catch-22. No way around it. We've got to work with the mind, through the mind, and why do we do that? Because we have faith in the accounts of the great beings that went before us, of millennia of great beings, and we have faith in their words. We have faith in their writings. If you don't have faith in that, what are you going to have faith in? Your own mind? Good luck with that. Your own mind is what's trapping us in the first place. We need help from outside our minds. Where is that going to come from? It's going to come from the sacred texts. Words. And eventually if we follow in the footsteps, then we contribute to that body of knowledge. If we make it there, then we write whatever we have to write, and we leave that for posterity. We say, yes, it's exactly as they say. That's why they always say, iti uchyate, thus it was said. That you read the Upanishads, thus it was said, thus it was said, thus it was said. Iti uchyate, iti uchyate. It's handed down, it's reaffirmed, generation after generation. Take it or leave it. If you leave it, then what? You're on your own. You and your mind. Good luck. How you doing so far with your mind, my friends? If you're like me, not too good. So, his tender bud-like feet are placed by the masters of yogis. See, the masters of yogis that have gone before. This is just what I was saying, that the text is referring to the masters that have done this. That these feet are placed by the masters of yogis into the receptacle of their hearts, meaning the minds, which are like the pericarp of full-blown lotuses. Always lotuses, lotuses. It sounds repetitive, but it's the best you can do to describe Bhagavan's beautiful feet made of pure consciousness, condensed consciousness. He's marked with the sign of Shri. That's a mark on Vishnu's chest. It's called Shrivatsa. It's a tuft of hair. It just is. No point asking why, any more than asking why God has 4 arms. It just is. It's Sat. That is the way God chooses to be. Okay, Shri, the goddess of prosperity, right? Shrivatsa, a curl of hair on his chest. He wears the Kaustuba jewel around his neck. Okay, so he wears this jewel, and it's not that the jewel beautifies God. Later on we'll see passages which says it's not that the ornaments beautify God, but God beautifies the ornaments. But remember, the ornaments too they're actually servants. They're servants. They're devotees, and that's how they serve Bhagavan. Right? You serve Bhagavan, like Hanuman serves Ram, and Yashoda serves Krishna, and there's infinite ways of serving Bhagavan, but somebody wants to be a bracelet. Some living entities want to be the Kaustuba jewel and sit on Vishnu's heart. That would be a pretty cool way to spend all eternity, just in a state of ecstasy that is just inconceivably and inexplicably blissful, and it's far greater than the ananda of the Atman, because Bhagavan is greater than the Atman. So the bliss of Bhagavan is far greater than any bliss inherent in our own Atmans. So this is a different kind of tradition, my friends. And so we have all of these descriptors, and you internalize them, and then when you sit in meditation, you manifest them in the mind. You bring up this form. You create it, yes. You construct it mentally, yes, with samskaras. Deities can be made of anything. They can be made of marble. They can be made of bronze. They can be made of paint. And they can be made of samskaras. They can be made of jewels. But this is a form made of samskaras. Okay, he's adorned with a belt, with very valuable rings, anklets, bracelets. His beautiful smiling face is delightful with lustrous, clean, curly, bluish locks. His abundant grace is evident from the play of his eyebrows. This whole poetry dedicated just to the play, the arches of Krishna's beautiful eyebrows, and the brightness of his happy, playful, smiling eyes. The yogi should gaze at this mental image. There it is. It's a mental image. All right, so Patanjali, you're fixing the mind on Om. Here, you're fixing the mind in this. It's a richer theistic. This Om is like a seed, and it's manifesting Om Namo Vishnave Namaha. Om Namo Narayana. That seed Om, right? So if you plant a seed, let's say you plant, I don't know, a mung dal seed, and you put it in soft tissues, eventually you'll see a little sprout come out of that seed, and then that sprout will grow and grow and grow. So Om is just kind of like the seed form of Ishvara, but then you nourish it with contemplation and bhakti and devotion, that seed will manifest its form according to the form that the devotee wants to see. You get to choose the form, whichever form you're attracted to. Here in this case is the four-armed Vishnu. So the Om becomes Om Namo Narayana. This is Indian bhakti, my friends. That's mildly disgusting. Ginger, black pepper, turmeric, and lemon and honey. If it's not disgusting, it's probably not good for you. Now, so what is kind of a samadhi is this? What kind of a dhyana practice is this? The yogi should gaze at this mental image of Ishvara, which is pieced together by the mind. The text is quite clear. What are you piecing together? Samskaras. From where? From what you read. Samskaras have to get into the mind from somewhere. So we read this description, and then when we sit, this is not my practice. I practice the Krishna mantra, but this is a practice. So with one's mind, one should focus on each limb consecutively, from the feet up to the smiling face of Krishna, the bearer of the club. But this is four-armed Krishna. Actually, Krishna also has four-armed forms. So how do you tell the difference between Krishna's four-armed form and Vishnu's? Krishna always has the flute, and he has a peacock feather. So that's how you know it's Krishna and not Vishnu. Otherwise, you wouldn't know, because they're both blue. They both wear yellow garment. You get yellow. And then the difference between the Krishna sects and the Vishnu sects, it's the same family, but within that family of Vaishnava family, the Vaishnavas think Vishnu is the source of Krishna. When Vishnu wants to incarnate, he incarnates as Krishna. So Krishna is derivative, secondary, and Vishnu is the supreme, cause of all causes. That's the term, the cause of all causes. Okay, because you could be a cause, but you could have a cause. So, for example, let's take a moment. I don't know. I can't remember now. I do so much teaching. I can't remember what I said to who and where and when. But what does it matter? We read these texts. It's like asana. You read them again and again. There's no such thing as repetition, my friends. Abhyasa. What is abhyasa in Patanjali? Dirgha kala. You do it forever. Nayarantara. You keep doing it and doing it and do it. So it doesn't matter if I've said this before. But what was I saying before making that comment?
You wanted to explain cause of all causes.
Yes, so you could be a cause. Let's say now milk is the cause of yogurt. So yogurt is the effect, and milk is the cause. I hope you understand cause and effect, right? I know these sometimes if folks are not familiar with philosophy, then they may have to think, they're hearing words in a different way, and it may, so don't worry if sometimes you're not familiar. It's not your fault. It's just that every field has its language, and so and if you're very familiar with this stuff, be patient and consider your fellow students that maybe if I repeat things, and we're all a sangha here. So a cause produces an effect. That's what you look up the word cause in the dictionary. There's no way of defining cause other than a cause is something which produces an effect. How else do you even define it? And how do you define an effect? An effect is something that comes from a cause. Look it up in the dictionary and tell me if it says anything else. Eleanor, does it say anything else? Look up cause in Wiki and see if it says anything other than a cause is something that produces an effect. If it does, I stand corrected. Right, now, a cause produces effect. So milk, cause, produces yogurt, effect. Now, but milk is a cause, but it's caused by something else, the cow. So milk is both a cause, and it's also an effect itself. It's an effect because it has a cause, which is the cow. So when you say cause of all causes, you want to put a stop sign to this. Because otherwise, an effect comes from a cause, but that cause is an effect of another cause, and that cause is an effect from another. Well, where are we going to end that? So therefore, the way we end it is saying the cause of all causes. So God is the cause of all causes. Otherwise, someone will say, well, what causes God then? So you want to make sure that you don't you end up with what's called an infinite regress. What does it say, Eleanor? Cause?
Exactly what you said,
Yeah,
plus the law
the
thing
law.
of course.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's 1 hour and 2 minutes now.
Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you. Right. So so therefore so we're doing this, right? We should focus on each limb consecutively. All right. From the feet up to the smiling face of Krishna, the bearer of the club. As one's intelligence, now doing this, the intelligence becomes purified because wherever there's Ishvara, even if it's a mentally constructed form of Ishvara, by the way, if one does this with deep devotion, that devotion, complete surrender, it's like a magnet. Ishvara manifests in our mental image, just as he manifests in the marble image in the temple, manifests in the brass image. It's all about devotion that attracts Bhagavan. So, one should focus on each limb consecutively, from the feet up to the smiling face of Krishna, bearer of the club. And as one's intelligence becomes progressively purified, it takes time. One should move on from the previous lower part of the Lord's anatomy and fix one's mind on the next higher part. So this is a particular type of meditation. You start at the feet and slowly work your way up in your mental meditation. Until Bhakti Yoga is awakened by this form of the universal Ishvara. By doing this, then devotion starts to manifest because ultimately, because Ishvara, when he sees our sincerity, he sees we're following the path, he sees we're humble enough to follow in the footsteps of those that went before us. We're not just rugged individualists, glorifying our own ego and imagining that, whoa, I can make up my own spiritual path. Good luck with that. But when we're humble, we surrender to Ishvara, and part of that surrendering is, we follow the path of great beings that went before us. When he sees that, he starts to bestow drops of bhakti yoga, which means slowly bhakti arises in the heart. Remember, nothing can arise in the mind unless it's got in there. Bhakti cannot arise in the heart. It has to come from the outside, like anything else, like your knowledge of Ben and Jerry's, the latest flavor of ice cream. Let's say Ben and Jerry's comes up with a raspberry, licorice, vanilla, flavor. You're only going to know about it, either you hear about it, somebody tells you, or you go and you taste it. And then it gets into your mind. So anything getting into your mind has to get into the mind through the senses. Has to come in from the outside. Bhakti is no different. It's not like it's mysteriously hidden in the heart. It has to come in, and where does it come from? Bhagavan bestows it. And how does he bestow it? When he sees our sincerity and our humility and our surrender. So these practices, we're showing some sincerity. We're saying, look, I'm trying. From my side, I'm trying. I don't know what to do. How the hell do I know how to meditate on God? What the hell does my mind? Well, how is my mind capable of telling me what God is and how to approach God? My mind just knows about boga and sense gratification and nonsense. So therefore, I need this help. I'm not just going to randomly just grab anything. I'm going to follow something that's been time tested for millennia and affirmed and reaffirmed and reaffirmed and reaffirmed by generations of great bhaktas who are not trying to rip me off. They're walking around in loincloths and dreadlocks. What do they want? They don't want anything from me. So therefore, I have reason to trust them. Their behavior is meticulous. So what reason would I not have? Would I have not to follow such beings? So therefore we follow these paths, and then the text says, Bhakti Yoga then is bestowed. So Bhakti Yoga is awakened by this form of the universal Ishvara, the supreme seer. So until then, one should instead contemplate grosser form of the supreme person after the completion of one's daily religious practice. So that means forms made of Prakriti, until actually the real Satchidananda form manifests. We have no option. We have no option. other than to, other than construct these forms. Same as if you want the Atman. Until the Atman manifests, you're doing the practices based on a mental construct of what the Atman is. You can't get away from this point. Now, when the ascetic, just let one more log on the fire. It's getting a little bit chilly. Let's see if we can put a big one on. Excuse me, my friends. Lovely. Okay, I got it in there. I have to be careful. I cracked the glass last time. So, when the ascetic becomes desirous of abandoning this world, now the more that bhakti manifests in the mind, naturally, spontaneously, the more one loses interest in the things of this world. It's not artificial, it's not suppression, it's not forced, it's spontaneous, and it's natural. It's just like when you grow up, as you grow older, the things you did as a child, you outgrow them and you just are not interested in them anymore. And it's a natural evolution. So as this is a sign of our bhakti, if you want a test of your yoga in general, but also bhakti, the test is how free are we becoming from desires? And it can't be artificial. If it's artificial, my friends, sooner or later, it collapses. I've seen so many sannyasis and people move into ashrams and they take sannyas because of social reasons and ego, and so all of them fall down, 90%. Can't be like that. As bhakti develops, automatically, spontaneously, organically, detachment arises in the mind, and that's how we test our progress. You want to know if you're making any spiritual progress? It's not about whether you learn Sanskrit. It's not about how many verses you memorized, how much Vedanta you studied. You did Ramanuja, Shankara, Madhva. You think Bhagavan gives a damn about that? We test our progress by how free we're becoming from desire. Very simple. Don't have to look at anybody else. Be honest with yourself. That's it. So as bhakti arises in the mind here, then when the ascetic becomes desirous of abandoning this world, right? That's a desire, but it's aklishta. It's a good desire. Patanjali calls it aklishta. It's not klishta. It's not from the kleshas. It's the opposite. That desire, it happens automatically. Automatically happens. So when that happens, now we've got the eightfold limbs. We have a Vaishnava version of it. He should establish himself in a comfortable, stable seat. Here it is, Stiram Sukham Asanam. Who knows the Yoga Sutra? Who knows Jessica, how does Patanjali describe asana? The three words.
Asana should be steady and easeful.
Do you know the Sanskrit?
Stira Sukham Asana.
Stiram Sukham Asana. By the way, I think you'd have a mind for Sanskrit. Have you ever thought of doing Sanskrit? We'll talk about that sometime. I think you'd really enjoy it. So here it is. Look, see it? Stiram Sukham Asanam. So that's the Patanjali, so Patanjali is just giving he's giving the schema. And different traditions are going to fill it out according to their own specificities, according to the specifics of each tradition. So Patanjali gives us the sort of basic structure of yoga, the 8 limbs. And here we see, and with his breath mastered, control his prana. Well, that's pranayama. His mind should not become attached to time and place. So he should, so that probably that's pratyahara, when you withdraw your senses, you're right. After controlling the mind by means of his pure intelligence, well, what's controlling the mind? When you're fixing the mind, right? Chanting Om Namo Narayana, Om Namo Narayana, and then you deviate and you start thinking of email, or you start thinking of some other thought, then another part of the mind, which is the intelligence, brings it back. You find yourself spacing out. You're supposed to be chanting a mantra. You're supposed to be contemplating or whatever it is that you're doing. And your mind gets distracted. And you may be gone for a few minutes even. At some point, another voice in the head, the higher voice in the head says, hey, you're spacing out. Come back. And Sankhya calls it the manas and the buddhi, the lower and the higher. Yoga just says the chitta. It calls it the nirodha samskara. There's the nirodha samskara. When the mind starts, flickering or getting distracted, the nirodha samskara brings it back. So here, the way they put it here is that after controlling the mind by means of his pure intelligence, so the buddhi is controlling this model in the way that's framed here. It's not that they're different models, just different language applied to the same thing. So the manas is the one that gets distracted. It's controlled by the buddhi. The yogi should merge it into the subtle body and the latter into the Atman. I'm not quite sure what that means. You can't merge anything into the Atman. So this is a question that, that I'd have to look at the commentaries. What does this mean? You merge the subtle body into the Atman. So at some point, I'll have to look into that. It doesn't make any sense to me. I have to look at because the thing about Atman is the Atman sometimes it means the body, sometimes it means the mind, and sometimes it means the Atman, the deep level Atman, the Satchidananda Atman. But in the Gita, often the term Atman is used for mind. It's like the term self in English. The self could be just a self, like a regular self. The self could be, your psychological self, or the self could be the soul. So even the English word self can be used in these different sorts of ways. So Atman can as well, and that's not very, it's not very helpful that it has this flexibility. Anyway, I don't know how to explain that comment at this point. At some point I'll look into this. What does it mean that the subtle body is merged into the Atman? Nothing can merge into the Atman. Prakriti can't merge into the Atman. The Atman is consciousness. So we'll leave that dangling for now. And I'll try to remember. I'm just going to be, just so you know, I'm going to be immensely busy until I retire. Sometime in the summer. I finish classes in May. I'm just sharing this with you. I'm not going to be, I'm going to keep all the studies going, but I'm not really going to be able to devote prime time. I have to sell the house, pack it all up, sell it, ship stuff all over to Europe. Well, all this stuff, right? So, and finish this book. It's finished. I got to edit it, and that takes forever, and read it and reread it and reread it. It's going to be immensely busy for the next. But after retirement, then definitely will be just this is it. This will be my retirement. So then we'll be able to look much more carefully if we run into these sorts of issues. Then we can dedicate more time to chasing down, looking at the commentaries. What do they say about this? How are they making sense of this? Okay. And then the wise person should then absorb the Atman into the supreme Atman. This sounds very Advaita-like. But Vaishnavas would have their own way of understanding it. For them, merging isn't it's not that a loss of individuality. When the Vaishnavas think of merging, what they mean is that they're absorbed in God, but they still remain separate entities. So all of this, it can be read in different sorts of ways. Right, and I don't want to get too much into it right now. So upon attaining complete peace, one should desist from all activity. In that state, so this is the state of Atman. So, okay, I suppose I'll have to say something now. Ishvara meditation can be used in two ways. There are two main goals, and there's so many goals, but for the purpose of what I'm going to say now, I'm going to say there are two ontological goals. Ontological means what's ultimate reality. There are two aspects of ultimate reality that that the different yoga schools seek, and the Bhagavatam embraces them both. One is one's own Atman, and one is Bhagavan as a distinct entity. In the Christian tradition, the Abrahamic tradition, almost all the focus is on God. You do have some mystics who talk about experiencing their inner self, but they're more marginal. You have, Therese d'Avignon, you have, St. John of the Cross. You do have mystics that talk very much like a Gyani would talk, where God is less out there and sort of more an expression of one's own self. But in the Bhagavatam, in the Vaishnavism, in Hinduism, you have traditions that seek the Atman, you have traditions that seek Bhagavan, and then you have traditions, like Patanjali, where there is a Bhagavan, there's Ishvara, he's distinct, he's a Purusha Vishesha, an eternal being, it's not Advaita Vedanta. Be careful of projecting Advaita Vedanta all over the place. That's a kind of a bad habit that Western yoga tends to have, this rather careless habit of projecting Advaita Vedanta on everything. Advaita Vedanta is a noble and honorable path, but it's one sub-school of Vedanta. It's one sub-school. And the other 6 schools of philosophy oppose it. Just be clear about that. Sankhya opposes it, Yoga opposes it, Nyaya opposes it, Vaisheshika opposes it, Mimamsa opposes it, and half of Vedanta opposes it. So let's not project Advaita Vedanta universally. There's reasons for that, because Advaita Vedanta came over very strongly in the 60s, counterculture with these great gurus that came over. A lot of them tended to be Advaitins. So I just want to, and Advaita Vedanta certainly is a noble and venerable path, but it's one path. And let's just be careful about not universalizing it. So in these other traditions, and Patanjali is a good example, and most of you have read Patanjali, so let's just focus on him. Ishwar is there. He's a Purusha Vishesha. Klesha Karma Samaya Anabhichinna, never been affected by samsara. He's never been affected by samsara, so he's in some transcendent space. Where is he? Patanjali doesn't tell us that. But he's a being. He's a guru purvesham. He's a teacher of the ancients. He's an active entity, but nothing to do with Prakriti. So why does he give us so little information about Ishvara? Because the goal of yoga is not bhakti. It's not a relationship with Ishvara. It's not love of God. What is the goal? He tells us right in the first verse. Ata yoga anushasanam yoga chitta vritti nirodha. What's the goal? Drashtu Svarupe Vastanam, 3rd Sutra. The goal is an experience of your Svarupa, not Bhagavan's Rupa. So he says it right in the beginning right in the header. So therefore, the role of Ishvara, Patanjali, and in other systems, if you want to seek your own Atman and abide and dwell in the bliss and eternal infinite bliss of your Atman, you can do that. You don't have to accept God. It's free will. But God can even give you that. And God, there's God, and he gives it to you. It's almost like, it's a bit weird, right? Why wouldn't someone say, hang on a minute, well, God's going to give me my Svarupa. Well, who's this God then? Why don't people ask this question about Patanjali? Think it through. Why are we asking this question? Who's this Ishvara? Who's Klesha Karma Samaya Navichinnaha, Tasya Sarvajnanya Shaya, supremely omniscient, never been affected by Prakriti. He's the teacher of the ancients, who's been around eternally, and he interacts. Why are we saying, well, who is he then? Okay, I'll get my Svarupa. Meanwhile, what's Ishvara doing? We haven't thought it through, my friends. So there are traditions which are sort of vaguely theistic, but they're not interested in God qua God. They want God to give them their Atman, and God will give it to you. Just like there's materialists who want God to give them stuff. It's called karma mishrita bhakti. There's bhakti is mixed with karma, with desires. So they go to God, give me, like give me religions, right? You light a candle, you ring some bells, you stick some money in the donation box, and you pray to God to give you stuff. Well, God will give it to you. You're not really interested in God. So likewise in jnana, it's called jnana mishrita bhakti. You pray to God, so you vaguely realize there's a God, but you're not interested in God. You want your svarupa vasta, you want your drashtu svarupa, but you want an experience of your own Atman. God will give it to you. That's Patanjali. And even what we're just reading now. You meditate on Vishnu, and then Vishnu, and you want, but really what you want is your Atma. I'll give it to you then. But but there are those who say, hang on a minute. It's kind of a logical, who's Ishvara then? Let me, then you become intrigued by God, like Śuka, remember? Śuka was also absorbed in the bliss of his own self, but then he heard about Bhagavan from his father, Vyas. And immediately he was no longer interested in just being infinitely blissful, situated in the bliss of his own self. He was like, who's Krishna? Let me find out about Krishna. Who's this? There's a soul greater than me, the creator of everything. I'm not the creator of nothing. And so therefore, don't be surprised or confused. It's not that there's, Atman seeking paths and Bhagavan seeking paths there are, but there's all shades of grey in the middle. There's those Atman seeking paths that nonetheless, somehow or other, accept Ishvara, but not really interested in Ishvara. They want Ishvara to give them their moksha. So then Ishvara will give it to you. It's free will. You can't force someone to love you. You want your bliss of your own Atman, fine. It just puzzles me, if I may be honest. It puzzles me. Why don't people, we in the West, Yoga Sutras has come over kind of like a canonical text, right? Because we're into this thing called asana, and so the gurus had to find a text that had something to do with asana. So they found the Yoga Sutra has got 3 sutras on asana. So let's use this. So over it comes, the Yoga Sutras, 3 sutras, asana, right? And there's Ishvara there. Why don't we say and why? And it's not Advaita Vedanta, because Ishvara is very different than Advaita Vedanta. Why don't we ask? Well, and let me put that samskara in your minds. Why aren't we asking who is this Ishvara? Well, you know what? You can't answer that question, Patanjali, because he doesn't give you that information. Because that's not the project. His project is to give you if you want your Atman, he's giving you the way to get your Atman. So if you're interested in Ishvara, you have to go to the texts that are going to tell you about Ishvara. What are those texts? The Purāṇas. And then we're reading the Bhāgavata Purāṇa, which is the Purāṇa about Krishna. But if you're a Shaiva, read the Shiva Purāṇa. But at least ask the question, who is Ishvara? And don't project Advaita Vedanta all over the place. Just uncritically. I hope I've made my point, and I'll shut up now. So in that state, this is the state of Atman now. There's no time. Time is the movement of Prakriti. Consciousness is beyond Prakriti, is non-Prakritic. When consciousness is absorbed in its own nature, it is no longer in the realm of Prakriti and the movements of Prakriti. Time is nothing other than the movement of Prakriti. It's not some other thing. Time isn't some entity. It's not some ontological real. It's simply the movement of matter. So there's no time. There's no time in that place, in this Atman, in consciousness. And that time is the controller of even the celestials, right? All of us in Prakriti, including the celestial beings, we're all trapped by time. What to speak of the higher gods, who are controllers over the universe, but they're still trapped by karma, the celestials. Neither sattva nor rajas nor tamas exists there. Prakriti means the gunas. The gunas means sattva, rajas, and tamas. Consciousness in its own nature, Brahman in its own essence, is trans-Prakritic. Therefore, there is no Prakriti, there's no gunas, there's no sattva, rajas, tamas, and time is nothing other than the movement of Prakriti, and space is nothing other than the distance between entities within Prakriti. What is space? So, at least according to Sankhya. So, these are not some other sorts of things. They're just, if you look at the Sankhya chart, you've all got Sankhya charts in the back of your Yoga Sutras. Well, there's Prakriti, right? And then there's Buddhi. Then you've seen the little schema, like a little diagram. There's Purusha all by itself on the left of the page, and then you have Prakriti, and then that becomes Buddhi, then that becomes Ahankara, and then it splits up to manas, and then you have the karmindriyas and the gyanindriyas, and you've all seen this, the tanmatras. Where's time? It's not on there. Why isn't it on there? Because it's not some separate thing. It's nothing other than the movements of other things. Okay? And where's love, my friend? There's no love. There's raga. There's raga. What do you think love is? It's raga. It's a klesha. What did you think? Do you think it was some magical thing called love? It's raga in the yoga tradition. We'll talk about that some other time. Oh dear. Okay. Now, the yogis long for the supreme abode of Vishnu. Where is it? Where is Patanjali's Ishvara? Vaikuntha. Where is that? In Brahman. What does that mean it's in Brahman? Brahman is Sat Chidananda. That means there are realms made of Sat Chidananda, with forms made of Sat Chidananda Brahman. Vishnu's forms, and there's realms. And this is a reflection of that. So there are realms with all beings, and and Vishnu's there, and the kingdom of God that the Christians talk about is called Vaikuntha in the Bhāgavata tradition. They are realms, and this world is a reflection. So that's where the devotees want to go. They long for the supreme abode. This is a longing. It's a spiritual longing. It's not raga. Raga as a klesha is raga for material things. It's completely different. Raga for material things, we have to have vairagya. We have to vai. We have to be free of that. But raga for Krishna, raga for Vaikuntha, raga for the Atman, we have to have that. They're aklishta. In the fifth verse, Patanjali says, Vrittayaha, Panchatayaha, Klishta and Aklishta. These are thoughts are either klishta or aklishta. They are grounded in the kleshas, like ignorance and ego and desire, or the opposite. So desire for God is a completely different category of thing. It's a different category. It's categorically distinct. So there's always going to be someone who says, hang on a minute, aren't we supposed to be free of desire? Yes, free of desire for Prakriti, but we have to intensely desire God, intensely. And that is, but who do you think the gopis are? Why are the gopis the highest of all bhaktas ever? What quality do they have that makes them the highest bhaktas? Finally, we're in a female-dominated universe. The top two spots in bhakti, female. The top two, the gopis, number one, and Yashoda, Krishna's mother, the maternal love, number two. So ladies can, ladies not going to be too thrilled with the Jnana traditions. All men, male, Vedanta, you could be a male Brahmana. You could be a male Brahmana. You want to study with the real Advaitins and Brahman who got to go down Sringeri Mat. Nowadays, you can pay enough money, anybody will teach you anything. But traditionally, male Brahmin, even to study Vedanta, forget about Vedic ritualism. Don't even let your shadow touch the Vedic, literally. Your shadow can't touch it, it's polluted. But bhakti, everything flips. And the top two spots are the ladies. So finally, we get a little bit of, we find, we have sort of, anyway.
Justice.
Yeah, there you go. Now, no time. Neither sattva, rajas, tamas exists there, nor does ego, intellect, or primordial matter, all these things connected with Prakriti. The yogis long for the supreme abode, desiring to abandon all that is illusory by neti, not this, this world here. Na iti, that becomes neti. It's actually na iti, not this. This is not what I'm looking for. These trivial sense pleasures, na eti, that's not where it's at. Na eti, I want Bhagavan, that's all I want. God. So everything else in na eti, so via negativa, via positiva. Via negativa, neti, na eti. Positiva, Bhagavan. Right, these are terms from the study of religion. Via negativa, via positiva. We throw in a little bit of jargon once in a while. So, they give up misidentification with the body. We are not the body. That's lesson 101. You go to a Jnana yoga school, 5-year-old, little Gurukula, 5-year-old kid, first lesson, first day in school. Okay, sit down, boys and girls. Okay, first lesson. You're not the body. You're Atman. That's the first lesson of Jnana. What's the first teaching of the Gita? Gita starts 2:11. First lesson. You're mourning for that which is not worthy of grief. The wise don't lament for the living of the dead. You're not the body. Bhishma's body dies. The body dies, not the Atman. First teaching. The rest of the Gita then picks up on that. So now they give up misidentification of the body and embraces adorable feet in their hearts with exclusive devotion at every moment. This is bhakti. That we are constantly embracing Bhagavan in our hearts. Okay? The sage who is situated in Brahman, you pick up the Atman, that's just the halfway house. You're situated in Brahman means you've experienced your own Atman. But you haven't gone the whole way. Some people get off the train there. Some people they attain their Atman, that's it. They don't go any further. Not the bhaktas. They ask that question: who is this Ishvara? Who is it? Where is he? What Ishvara? If Ishvara must be greater than me, I'm just a little tiny Aksha. What's this Ishvara? What is this lotus eyes? What does that mean? I want to see these lotus eyes. And then you seek Bhagavan, my friends. And if you seek intensely enough, then, and if you humbly, can't be arrogant, can't say Bhagavan. There has to be full surrender, 100%. And then Bhagavan gets attracted to that. Just like we do. If someone approaches you completely helplessly, you could be the meanest person on the planet. If someone comes up to you, looks you in the eye, totally helpless, and begs you for help, I bet most of us would do what we could. It's just the nature of the human heart. So Bhagavan's no different. So when we completely surrender, we capture the grace of Bhagavan, my friends. And it's the same as the Christian message. There's no difference when it comes to this sort of thing. Okay. The sage situated in Brahman, that's no big deal. Who is vigorous, whose mind is controlled, who has gained wisdom from the sacred text. Where are you going to get wisdom from? It's not going to come from your own mind. It's got to come into the mind, like everything else comes into the mind through the senses. So wisdom comes from sacred text. A wise person is a person whose mind is absorbed in the sacred text, actually. It's getting that wisdom from outside, and it becomes the mind. Because your mind is really just a container. And your mind is a container of samskaras. So your mental state is nothing other than what samskaras are active at any given moment. So if you want your mental state to be a wisdom state, then you've got to put the wisdom in there. Where does the wisdom come from? It's got to come in from the outside. Then that's why Patanjali says, second word in the second chapter, Kriya Yoga, Svādhyāya. First word is you got to control your desires. Otherwise, your mind is too full of desires. You can't even study. You can't even sit and study the sacred text if your rajas is out of control. So if you look at Kriya Yoga, second chapter, right? How do you do yoga, right? First chapter, okay, this is what it is, samadhi, right? All these stages. And then the second chapter is like, okay, got that first chapter right. How do you do it? What Kriya? What do you do? Well, first thing is tapaha, just control the mind a bit so that that it's not just totally wildly full of never-ending desires. Start to control those. Now you've created a little space. Then Svādhyāya, start putting the wisdom in there. Because that's what Svādhyāya is. Wisdom text, and that wisdom gets transformed from the text through the eyes. In the old days, it would be through the ears. And your mind becomes that. So the more you do Svādhyāya, the more your mind, it becomes wise. There's nothing magical, mystical, or ooey-wooey about it. It's very straightforward. So therefore, who's vigorous? Mind is control. Who has gained wisdom from the sacred text? It's got to come from somewhere. Should leave his body in the following manner. So this is kind of like at the end of life. So this is kind of a radical. By the way, the Bhagavatam's not promoting this. This is just kind of classical yoga. And I don't know, I have to think about this now. My project in retirement now is to really, really, really study the Bhāgavata Purāṇa and ask these sorts of questions. Why is Śuka started off with this when it's not really, the rest of the text does not prioritize or focus on this kind of inaction forest yoga? So therefore, these are when you really enter into I really want to enter into the Bhagavatam. I want to leave this world and enter, sort of mentally and just, spend 3-4 hours a day immersed in the Bhagavatam. That's my project for retirement. I hope some of you will join me, at least for an hour every so often. But anyway, so that's the question I have now. Why has he started off with this set of teachings, which is not really, it's honored, it's venerable, it's definitely there, but I wonder why he's starting off with that when really the rest of the text is going to be much more active, serving God, thinking of God, chanting, it's going to be a much more active kind of bhakti yoga. That's a question I hope to get some clarity on. Okay, but here, how do you leave the body? You should block the anus with the heel. So this is this is almost like a spiritual suicide at the end of life. Then energetically raise the prana up through the chakras. Now, the Bhagavatam has no interest in chakras and the Tantra physiology at all. This Tantrika physiology, Kundalini, the chakras, it's not Vedanta, it's not Nyaya, it's not any of the 6 schools. It belongs to a cluster of traditions that you can call Shakta traditions, or the Tantra tradition, or the Hatha tradition, or the Kundalini traditions. There's loads of names for it. It's not that the Bhagavatam doesn't reject it, it's just not interested in it. But here we get one of in 18,000 verses, it doesn't even say chakra, it just says you raise the prana through the 6 locations. I put the chakra in brackets. So this chakra, don't conflate. Everything gets mixed up when it comes to the West, quite typically. Everything gets mixed up. Keep your traditions separate. There's different traditions and they lead to different goals. Decide which goal you want. Study the traditions and figure out where do you want to end up. Do you want to end up in a state of infinite bliss, Advaita Vedanta? Then be clear about that. But first check what the options are, and don't. This idea that it all ends up in the same place, where the hell does that idea come from? That's the 19th century. That's a 19th century idea. That's not what any of these traditions are saying, that all these paths lead to the same place. Of course they don't. Study them. They all disagree. They're very clear that they're different from the other paths. Sometimes they debate them, and if those other paths are challenging their premises, they'll take them on, and that's what debate is all about between the Buddhists and Nyaya. So don't think this kind of lazy, very lazy, new agey idea that everything ends up in the same place. Of course it doesn't. Each tradition, and it's not that one is right and the rest are wrong. The end goal is variegated, my friends. There's options to be had, just as there's options in this world. Why do we think there's no options in the spiritual, in the spiritual world? That's a very recent idea. And it comes, I won't tell you where it comes from, but it comes from a very specific source. And somehow it's got universalized, because I think it's lazy because it why do I say it's lazy? Because if you read the traditions, it doesn't, no tradition says that if you do Advaita Vedanta, you end up in the same place as Vaishnava Vedanta. No, you don't. Study them for yourselves. And that's what maybe it's a bit facetious to say lazy, but if you do any study, you realize they're not saying Kashmir Shaivism isn't saying the same thing as Advaita Vedanta, and it objects to Advaita Vedanta. Vaishnavism is not saying the same thing. Neither is Jainism. Buddhism, completely different, not completely different, but has its own idea of interdependent momentariness, and on and on and on. Okay, I'm ranting as usual. Right now, so here this chakra system is really not part of, but here it is. Right, so he should raise the air, right? So he should raise the prana up through the 6th location, the chakras. So sometimes they talk about 7 chakras, 8 chakras, whatever it is. The Bhagavatam says 6. He should raise the air situated in the navel. Manipur, see the square brackets? I put that in. The word chakra is not in it. It just says 6 locations. When you have a square bracket, it means the author is inserting something That's not in the original, but he wants you to know that he's inserted it or she has inserted it, the author, and then you put it in square brackets. That's an academic convention. So we should raise the air situated in the navel to the heart, and I've added these names, Anahata chakra. From there, by means of the motion of the upward moving air, Udayana, right, life air. So you lead it up, right? Lead it up. So this is basically overlaps with the chakra physiology. That's more typically associated with the kundalini. There's no kundalini here, though, just the chakras. Right, so you raise it up between the eyebrows, indifferent to all desires, and the 7 outlets of the body, eyes, nostrils, ears, and mouth closed off. After holding the life air there without effort, with his gaze fixed, he should eject it through the crown of the head, the Sahasrara chakra, abandon his body and attain the supreme. And there's options. But if, O king, you should wish to reach the abode of Brahma, if you don't want that, this ejection process is for impersonal, Advaita, is for the non-personal moksha. Where not Vishnu, not those divine realms, it's just that you want a state of infinite eternal bliss. Then you can do that. Then you can eject, right? Remember Parīkṣit's question. So maybe this is partly the answer, though, what I was asking before. Why is he starting off with this? Well, Parīkṣit is saying, well, what do you do at the moment of death? So Śuka is saying, well, okay, you can do this. If you want your regular jnana moksha, or maybe you want to go to the celestial realms. So he says, but if, O king, you should wish to reach the abode of Brahma, right? He's a celestial being, not Brahman, Brahma. He's the celestial with the 4 heads that you see in Indian art. Or indeed, the pleasure grounds of the celestial beings who can travel through the air, right? So the celestials have siddhis, they have powers, and they can travel, right? We can travel underwater, or we have we can fly in the air, but we need machines. The celestials don't, but still we've mastered a certain siddhi, if you will, that we've figured out whatever it is, the air currents, and we figured out, ways of manipulating Prakriti on a gross way, that we can fly and go underwater. Well, the celestials can do that, manipulating Prakriti in subtle ways. They don't need machines. That's just us in our karmically conditioned this realm. Our karma is such that we have to use kind of what the text will call ugra karma, horrific technologies. It says it, horrific technologies, ugra karma. But the celestial is much more graceful. They can do it through mental powers. We have to use these, oil and polluting technologies to accomplish a kind of siddhis, right? Flying and going underwater. Think about it. Okay. And okay. So, but if you want to go to the celestial realms or the pleasure grounds of celestial beings who can travel through the air, or maybe you want the 8 mystic powers, right? Patanjali mentions them in chapter 3, over anything made of the gunas. Well, if that's what you want, you remember the question. Parīkṣit says, what do you do at the end of life? So before telling him, really the goal is, before getting really into the bhakti part, he says, well, you have these options. You can just attain your Atman, the jnana, Brahman, a kind of a Dvaitin kind of moksha, or you can go to the celestial realms, right? They say all of this is handed down through the centuries. So they say means those who have done this, the earlier generations of yogis. They say that the masters of yoga, who practice the cultivation of knowledge, austerities, yoga, samadhi, and devotee, and who have subtle bodies that can travel through the air, right? You're not liberated, though. You still have a subtle body, but pretty cool. I wouldn't mind, I wouldn't mind spending, a lifetime, with some of these cities. But again, Patanjali says they're only of interest to the worldly minded. Those whose mind is still vyuttana, still looking outward for pleasure, vyuttana. If you're still looking outward for pleasure, then, well, why not go to a celestial realm and look outward in the celestial realm? Or, if you're going to go for boga, you might as well go for the high level boga. I wouldn't mind. Quick stopover. What do you think, Jan? Quick stopover in the celestial realm. We get back to our yoga work. Okay. Problem is you get sidetracked. You could lose, God knows how long you could lose in the celestial realms. Okay, I guess we stick with our bhakti. All right, so such destinations are not available for those who engage in karma. No, these you need to really, you can't just go there. Forget about moksha, even the celestial realms. Not if you're just doing karma or mundane ritualistic activities, you're not going to get to those realms. All right, so then he goes on to this sort of subtle pathways. There are this kind of information about subtle, they're prakritic. Here he does mention the sushumna. Look, I said he hadn't mentioned Kundalini. I forgot about this, but he does mention Sushumna. So that by inference, we can say it's not that they reject the Sushumna and the Kundalini. It's just not the process of Bhagavata Bhakti. So then you've got these realms, right? Brahma's realm, the abode of Agni, right? The god of fire. And there, when all his impurities have been cleansed, and you can proceed higher. And then you go and on and on and on. This is something but you're still in the subtle body, and then you have these mystic powers, anima, right? Smaller than the smallest. Anyway, and you can see all the cool stuff in the universe, blah, blah, blah. And this all gets a bit technical. We don't have time. But these two paths, right? These two paths about which you inquired. So the path to Vishnu, I suppose, and the path to some kind of celestial path. Let's see what they are. Actually, right, we're on verse 32. These two paths about which you inquired, O king, are eternal and are described in the Vedas. Actually, Bhagavan Vasudeva, that's another name for Krishna, had previously spoken about them after he had become satisfied from being worshipped by Brahma. So we will maybe read the story of Brahma. He's the first yogi. It's a very cool story. Let's read that next. We'll read the story of Brahma. So then one of the paths is Bhakti Yoga. I'm just, and the other is some kind of celestial, other kind of destination. Okay, my friends, I think that's okay for now. And he concludes, right, the question of Parīkṣit, what do you hear about? What should you recite? What should you remember? Therefore, O king, verse 36, let's see what 35 is. See, this is going to be so much fun to just really study this deeply. And the best way to really absorb something is to share it with others. I hope you'll all stay, and I hope some of you will continue reading this wonderful text in the future. I just need to retire and wrap everything up. Therefore, O king, it is Bhagavan, Hari, who should be heard, recited, remembered about by people with all their hearts in all places and all times. Bhagavan is the soul of the saintly person, meaning he's always in the hearts of the bhaktas. Those who drink the nectar of stories about him attain through the vessels of the ears, right? It's got to come in through the ears. Knowledge of God comes in through the ears, or for us it's through the eyes, because we read now. But in the old days, you didn't have a printing press. So it's the ears. So anything in the mind, this is the point I've been stressing, it's got to get into the mind, and it comes into the mind through the senses. So knowledge comes in through the ears. For us, it comes in through the eyes, because we tend to, we read. So what happens when these nectar of stories come through the vessels of the ears? They purify the heart from the contamination of sense objects, or our desires. We desire these pathetic, trivial, material things, riches and wealth and sense gratification. But the more we absorb our mind in the stories, we lose all of that interest in all of that. Naturally, spontaneously, Vairagya of Patanjali. Okay, my friends, so we will move on to another story in a couple of weeks. And if anyone has any questions, please Federico, I had a Sanskrit question I thought you might be interested in chasing down. I can't remember what it is now. But But I'll if I remember it, I'll let you. We have Federico is our Sanskrit pundit now. Whenever we run into a problem, we pass it on to Federico. He's quite remarkable. He'll chase down. But he'll look at the Panini and come up with a really detailed answer. So we're grateful for you, Federico. We honor you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why you're mentioning subtle body and it says Kshetranya?
I don't know. Which one was that? Which verse?
That was 16.
All the way up there?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to interrupt you.
No. Okay. Subtle body. Okay, let's have a look. 16. Kshetrajna. See? After controlling
There.
the mind, the yogi should merge it into the. I have to look at what I put in footnote 11 because.
The footnote is that is Atman. Kshetranya as Atman.
Well, that's what it is in the Gita. Kshetrajna, there's a whole chapter on the Kshetrajna. I think it's chapter 13. But why have I put subtle body then?
I don't know.
So, but then if you merge it into the Atman, and then the Atman into the Atman, what does that mean? So the Kshetrajna must be different from the Atman. Otherwise, why would you be merging into the Kshetrajna and then merge the Kshetrajna into the Atman? So the Kshetrajna must be something in between, something not quite Atman. I don't have an answer right now, Eleanor. I'd have to. I can't remember what in footnote 11 I say Atman.
You say the Kshetranya is the Atman still connected to the subtle body.
Okay, so that makes a bit better sense. So it's
okay.
So therefore, there must be some interim stage between the complete absorption in the subtle body and maybe in some intermediate stage. Okay, so then the only way then that would help my problem before when the Atman can merge into the Atman, Svarupe Vastanam, but the subtle body can't merge into the Atman. So it doesn't look like I did that I explained that very well. If that's what I wrote in footnote 11, we need to do a better job with that. The subtle body cannot merge into the Atman. Nothing can merge into the Atman. There's no inside the Atman. There's no inside or outside. So the subtle body merges back into Prakriti. In Patanjali, what happens to the subtle body? Subtle body is made of the three gunas. What else is it made of? There's only the three gunas, and then there's consciousness. What else is there? There's Prakriti and Purusha. What is Prakriti? The three gunas. What's the subtle body? Prakriti. It's a subtle. So it's made of the three gunas. So the subtle body merges back into the. Patanjali says that in second chapter. The subtle body merges into Prakriti, and then the Atman Svarupe Vastanam. If you want to say that merges into Atman, well, technically it just is Atman, and it just now experiences without the subtle body. As object, it experiences its Svarupa. Now, I'd have to look at that. I'd have to go back and look at this verse. I did this, I don't know, 10 years ago. I can't remember what I was thinking.
Didn't the subtle body carry the Atman to the next incarnation?
Yeah, but we're talking about liberation now.
So the subtle body doesn't go back to the gunas.
It does, yes. And when the subtle body goes back to the guna, that is liberation. That's what liberation is. You're now liberated not from the gross body, because you're liberated from the gross body every death. So liberation is liberation from the subtle body.
Right.
Now, what happens to the subtle body goes back to the guna. So exactly what's going on in that verse, I'd have to look at the Sanskrit and look at it again and look at the footnote and try to recreate what I was thinking, or at least go back into the commentators and look at it with fresh eyes. But in terms of the metaphysics, nothing can merge into the Atman. That's out. So therefore, so if the Atman is merging in the Atman, it's like the Gita says, Atmanam Atmanen Atmana, or Patanjali says Svarupa Vastanam, you're not really merging. It's just that now when you're freed of the subtle body, the Atman is what it always was, but now it's in its Svarupa rather than Vritti Sarupyam, rather absorbed in the Vrittis. It's now in its own Svarupa, but there's no actual merging going on. So I probably didn't do a good job in my wording of that verse. I don't know. I'd have to look at it, but I'm going to say I didn't do a good job with that translation right there. It's not clear. I should have made it clearer. Questions, my friends? Anyone want to say anything? No? Well, then we bid you farewell.
Yes. Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
Just a quick one.
Yeah.
When you say Brahman,
Who's talking? Who's talking?
my name's Ruth.
Okay,
Ruth Iriondo.
we're going to replace the okay. So we
Yeah.
have
My question is, you when you use the word Brahman,
yeah.
it's just a different pronunciation, I'm assuming, for Brahman, Brahman.
Brahman, yes. Oh yeah, don't follow my pronunciation. If I, don't worry. If I'm not, I may not be pronouncing it perfectly. Brahman. How do you want to?
We better follow your
No,
pronunciation.
don't. Go online, find some South Indian Brahmin, some nice South Indian Brahmin, and follow that. Brahman is how I say it. How would you say it, Ruth?
Brahman.
Well, there's an H there,
Yeah.
so you have to say.
It sounds like like you're putting like a CH in it.
No. Well, I don't. Well, if I am, I'm not doing it right. Brahman.
Okay.
And by the way, the H and the gutturals are there was a time when H is associated with the gutturals, with the k, but that's a separate linguistic thing, yes. So therefore, H is often in Sanskrit grammar interchangeable. Like, for example, hun becomes gun. So there is that actual the location of the H and the location of the gutturals is actually from the back of the pit of the throat.
That's right.
I shouldn't be. If I'm making a guttural, that's me. Don't follow me, Ruth.
Okay.
That's the worst thing you could do. How bad.
I'm very
move.
much enjoying you, though. Very much enjoying you and all that you have to say, though.
Yeah, that's fine.
And
don't assume everything I say is as long as I'm following the text, then you can take that seriously. But don't take anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
true.
my pronunciation is not something that I'm particularly. Find a nice South Indian Brahmin. I think the South Indian Brahmins for me. But remember, pronunciation is different. You listen to a Bengali or a Kashmiri or a South Indian. They're pronounced very differently. So don't think there's some. We don't know what. I mean, even in the earliest Vedic times, it's just like any language. There are different way. There's going to be different accents. There's going to be different modalities of pronunciation. So don't think there's some pristine, original one-size-fits-all Vedic pronunciation. There always would have been variations, like r, ri. The vocalic R is pronounced differently. R, ri. Some in Marathi they do ru. So there are different ways of pronouncing it, but be that as it may, don't follow me. Follow Sky. Sky's up there. Follow Sky's pronunciation. Go on, Sky. How would you say Brahman? No, she's muted. She's not going to put her.
I wanted to confirm that I was thinking of the same thing as you. I just have one other question.
Yeah.
Did you say that Bhakti is then an extension of Vedanta?
Yeah, it sees itself as.
Yeah.
It sees itself as clarifying. The Bhāgavata Purāṇa calls itself the ripened fruit of the Vedic tree. Not just the Puranas think they supersede Vedanta, but they have to ground themselves in Vedanta. Vedanta is Shruti. So I don't know if you're familiar with the difference between Shruti and Smriti.
No.
The Shruti are the four Vedas, and then, Aranyakas, Brahmanas, and Upanishads. That's all. The Shruti, that means that which was heard. That they are considered to be sacrosanct, the highest. Like
Okay.
in Islam, you have Quran and you have Hadith. So anyway, so therefore, the Upanishads and Vedanta are considered to be kind of super authentic. So the Smriti is the Puranas and the epics and everything else. Everything after the Shruti has four layers. I don't want to get into it, but anyway, yes, the Puranas see themselves as not, but they claim to be containing, the fruit of the Vedic tree. So they see the Vedas and Vedanta as just kind of like seed form, as just kind of like, if you read the Vedanta, it's pretty, it's not, there's not, I mean, it's, how do I say this? Vedanta is not a lot of information, to be honest. It needs a lot of unpacking, and a lot of that unpacking is bringing in material from the Smriti. So yes, the Puranas see themselves as an expression of Vedanta, and even as higher, as containing, as developed truths that are only found in seed form in the Vedanta. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome, Angela.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is my first class, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you. I am a person who has studied mythology pretty extensively, so I love that you have great objection to mythologies. And my question, if I can formulate it as a question, it's more of just wanting to know more, right? Because more of your perspective, because I studied, my perspective on mythologies has been that they're almost identical with sacred traditions, and that all of them are humanity's attempt to reach this one unknowable. So as we're going through the text, and you were saying everything's mental construct, we can't go anywhere without the mind. Totally get it. So if everything's a mental construct, why do you object to the existence of mythologies or people respecting mythologies?
I mean, because I think the label mythological, right, goes back to the Greeks. So you had mythos and logos. So the Greeks had to grapple with their the Homeric stories and the immoral activities of the gods, right? So, and they didn't know what to do with that, and so originally mythos and logos meant the same thing in the earliest Greek period. But at a certain point, and you see this emerging with Plato, a distinction is made between logos as reason, and which then becomes associated with fact and factuality and historicality and so forth. And mythos then gets relegated to these stories that are not factually real or true. And Plato divides them into two, moral mythology and immoral mythology. And he sort of says, well, we can teach our children. He's kind of, this is in the context of education. What are we going to teach our children? These immoral stories of the gods. So he says, well, we can certainly teach them the moral stories, because they'll learn morality, but the stories themselves are not true, but they'll learn morality. And he says, actually, we can even sometimes teach them the immoral stories, because they'll also learn from those. But from that point, or at least I'm not saying it was Plato specifically, but it emerges in Plato, but other thinkers too. You get a bifurcation between mythos, which is not true in any kind of historical factual way, but which may contain moral teachings, and logos, which then is reason-based, and of course reason is based on empiricism and therefore connected with factuality. Now, and then so now that sort of gets projected into Christianity, and then Christ as logos, and then of course when Christians encounter colonization and and then the label of mythos gets projected onto non-Christian traditions. Specifically, now my objection to it is that I'm perfectly open to the idea that there's celestial realms that are empirically beyond, that are beyond our empirical perception. For me, that there's no way of refuting that possibility. I don't see how science can in its present state. So I don't think, for me, the forms of Bhagavan and Purāṇa Vishnu, I object to them being, if you call them mythological, you're saying they're not true. One, not you, but one is saying they're not true. And for me, you certainly cannot, that's an a priori faith position. That reflects an empirical metaphysics, that reflects an empirical worldview. Now, if one is uncomfortable in an empirical worldview and feels there's lots of things beyond the domain of empiricism, and that maybe some of these sacred traditions, rather than being mythological, or rather transmitting information about realities, then the term mythos becomes objectionable, at least for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Really great to hear that. What I take away from that is, yeah, if you suggest they're mythologies, you're suggesting they're not true.
Precisely.
And yeah,
How do
I
we
just
know
come
that?
from a different school of thought.
Yeah.
But I'm studying Jungian psychology
Okay.
and for many years now. But, I mean, he had tons of respect for them, that mythologies were like allegories for
Yeah.
something higher.
Yeah.
Never untrue, but humanity's attempt again to reach what's unknowable, to
Sure.
comprehend what's unknowable. So thanks for your question. Thanks for your reply,
Sure,
and
sure,
I
sure.
look forward to being in the class again.
That's a middle path, allegory, metaphor, all of that's a middle path, and, Jungian paradigms. But what if there are factual celestial realms, cosmographic realms? What if they exist and are real? They're just not empirically perceivable. If they were real, then the title mythological is inappropriate. That's all. That's my position. And how do we know they're not
Thank you.
real? And how do we know that some of these sacred traditions are not transmitting information about them? We don't. We don't know that. Have a great day. Thank you. Wayne.
An hour and 9 minutes now.
Okay, we can go for it's okay. It's as long as it's not like 2 hours. We'll take Wayne and then we'll wrap it up, my friends, if that's okay.
Namaste. I'm enjoying your class. I'm in your the Vedanta Academy class also
Okay.
that you do. So that's how I hooked up with you. And you've talked about retiring. I've been retired for 7 years, but I've spent the last 3 totally devoted, and I spend all my days in meditation, studying scripture, and that's all I think about all day long, because that's all it's great. So I'm looking forward to tagging along with you in your retirement. So you were inviting people to tag along. I got a head start on you, but it's great.
Thank you, Wayne, and I look forward to learning from your experiences.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for all you do. Great lectures.
Thank you, Wayne. I'll follow in your footsteps. Have a great evening, everybody, and we all know how we're going to end. We all have a samskar of recollection. What are we going to do? We're going to go Jai Shri 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 Radhe Shah. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.
I'm just going to look at the chats in case there's any question, and I'm going to stop recording.